Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our concepts edition, episode 154. I'm Devin Bedoni of Like and Precision.
And I'm Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing and Arda. And today's quote is, "You can't fall out of bed if you sleep on the floor," from the book Nonviolent Communication.
I laughed out loud when I read this, but I didn't actually understand it. So we should probably explain it.
I think it's just kind of like avoiding failures is not necessarily like you don't want to sleep on the floor just because it prevents you from having the failure of falling out of bed. I think as it relates to lean manufacturing, I think it's sort of like line downtime. Like the goal of TPS is not avoiding line downtime. In fact, they encourage line downtime because it means you are finding problems. And if you stop having those problems, and I think it's just very easy in business to start to be a little bit gun shy of failures, which I am feeling currently quite a bit. Instead of like, all right, we'll experience them and then give ourselves some time and bandwidth to fix them.
Yeah, for sure. This kind of ties into a point I had written in here, which is that I think in business, so many processes are oriented around reducing individuals' workload or individual departments' workload. There's a lot of situations where it feels like you're going backwards to implement a process improvement that puts more work on an individual or a department. And they're like, obviously, this is a bad idea. Like, how could it be better if you're like making us work more to do the same thing? But if that work more, happens at the right point in the process and throughput of the system as a whole goes up, it can be super beneficial. And I think that is one thing that's super common in lean that people chafe at is, I'm trying to think of a good example.
I mean, I think, classic operation focused process blind. One that comes to mind for us was just more changeovers on the CNC.
Yeah, that's
is not better for the operator.
Yeah,
but it is way better for the organization.
Yeah, everybody's like, this is more work. Why are we doing this? This is crazy. And you're like, well, yes, it is more work, but we will actually get more done.
Single piece flow generally just feels insane. I keep citing this, but I'll mention it again. There's a great video of a cabinet shop that I'm forgetting his name. It's Quantum Lean, I believe. Where he goes and helps them do single piece flow in a cabinet shop.
Okay.
Day one, he's just like, all right, here's what I want everyone to do. You on the table saw, I want you to rip one part. I want you to then walk that part to the chop saw, cut it down to the length, and then walk that over to the gluing station where they will start laying up and gluing one door. And normally you load the gluing table. It's this clamping device that I think heats the glue or something. I'm not too familiar. And meanwhile, they're walking a lot, right? Because the tools are not designed for single piece flow, where it's like really easy to just pass parts. They are used to working where they batch it onto a cart and then wheel that cart to the next machine, cut a bunch of them, bring it to the next machine. And by the end of the day, they had exceeded their kind of like stretch goal for production. And everyone's looking around being like, how is that possible? Right? Like even on the floor, they're just like this, it doesn't, every piece of the puzzle that I experience takes a little longer. So what gives?
Yeah. I kind of experienced, or it sort of appears similar with our tool cart prep thing. It feels like an extra step, feels like extra work. And it may be, I don't know, there might be other ways to kind of tackle that problem that don't involve that, but simultaneously it does, the system efficiency goes up. And I think, at some point you have to look at how much, right? You can't just like add labor infinitely, right? But so you do have to kind of I think, have some awareness of how much extra work you're adding potentially. But I think we just like knee jerk so
Yeah.
hard away from adding work to anybody's individual workload that
Yeah, I think
we miss so many things.
the difficulty, yeah, I think the difficulty is that organizations are made up of individuals, and so every single one of them comes up with ways to minimize their work.
Yeah.
I think quality is a really strong example of this across the board, where intermittent failures, like we saw this with our CNC, where it's like we're doing, classic bad practice cost accounting on our components. It's like, oh, well, it's a 3-minute cycle on this part. And so if we could reduce that down to, 2 minutes, 25 seconds, we could charge this much less. And so then you work hard to do that. And then maybe you rip a block out of the vise and break an end mill, and then you're down $50 for the end mill, and your downtime on the machine because you're doing that, fix and then restarting the program and whatever, and not going like, okay, let's amortize that cost over all of our parts, because often it's more expensive than just having a reliable process, a slower, more reliable process. Same with like 100% in-station inspection. Right. Yeah. It's very easy to just pass it on to the next station, and then eventually someone finds the problem and you go, oh shit, like what happened, and let's find a good fix. But really you should have just put a little more effort into not passing problems along. I really liked your framing from last episode of, instead of overproduction, framing it as doing what you should be doing right now. I've sort of been thinking a lot about that. Yeah, I think it's really strong and suggests more, sort of like a positive rather than a negative, like what you should be doing rather than what you should not be doing.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to speak to. So many folks immediately, when they're discussing lean, just focus on all the downsides that they will avoid, or the downsides they are currently experiencing. And it takes a while to kind of like, get your head back around to the positives. And
actually, an interesting point on that front, Miguel, our CTO at Arda, before he joined the team, because he was an advisor for a while, we were talking a lot about how it would save you time and how it would reduce the amount of labor you put into like procurement, et cetera. And he was like, the problem with that framing, and same with lean as saving downside, is it's finite. Right? Like as a business, let's say you do $1 million a year, the most, let's say your payroll is whatever, $100,000. I don't know what it is. Just for example, $100,000 a month in a big organization, and you're like, we're going to save you 20%. Like that's 20 grand, and that's great. But the maximum you can save is $100,000. Whereas if I said to you, what if you could ship things, what if your lead times were reduced by 500%? What would that do for your business? It's like, oh, well, we'd start winning a lot more deals. There's a lot more upside potential. Our friend Han had a similar point about like like in your bank account can only go to zero on the if you're losing money, but then on the flip side, so it's sort of like asymmetric.
Yeah,
there's a lot more gains to be had than losses to be saved, kind of.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna loop back. Rob Lockwood, another friend of the pod, reached out post listening to the tool organization episode, and pointed out there was a part of the system, a pretty key part of the system, that we completely glossed over. And that was, for anyone who didn't listen to that, go back and listen to the tool episode for the deep dive. But a key thing that I pointed out was, for a random identifier numbering scheme to work, you have to have a really good data bank that links to your physical system. And the key for us was a Fusion Airtable API integration that our friend Avi put together for us. And what that does is it automatically populates the table that, generates all the tooling Kanbans based on our Fusion library. So we don't have to manually double entry, basically. And so the way that system works, just to kind of break it down, is when we order a new tool, usually, generally speaking, it's a programmer who orders a new tool.
Makes sense.
Generally speaking, we bring a job in review as you start to, as we first review the job to see, to just populate it to the floor, we'll do a review and see if we think we are going to need any extra tooling.
Yeah.
And then flag it. And then generally speaking, once you start programming, day before a job runs, hopefully sometimes multiple days before, you will go and figure out what specific tools you need. And so at the time of ordering, we go into our Fusion library and we populate new ID numbers, so whatever is open sequentially, with all the information from wherever we purchased it from. So if it's MSC, we'll just copy over all of the info and the link from MSC. That gets passed through to the Airtable database. Now there is latency in that. It sometimes is very quick. Sometimes it can take up to, several hours. I think mostly to do with like the script that does the writing between the Fusion library and the Airtable library is local on one computer, and if the change is made on another computer, it doesn't always
fascinating
sync through the whole Fusion ecosystem immediately. So right now, what we do is we just go and we make a paper Kanban that's dropped in the ordered bin that has the ID number, and basically is like, that's the flag that there's a new tool inbound and some basic information about it. And then by the time the tool arrives, whoever's receiving can use that paper Kanban to figure out what it is and then go print the real Kanban that will have been passed through.
Oh, nice.
By that time. And that used to be just a Airtable thing. Now we have Arda linked to that same table. And so it gets passed to Airtable, which then populates it to Arda as a new card.
Yeah, I actually just pinged, because we're looking at doing the same thing. So I just pinged Avi about building that into Arda.
Yeah.
How do you deal with tool holders? Like, because you can populate that into the tool, into Fusion as well when you build up a tool. Does it pass that parameter? Or I guess you treat that kind of...
It could. Yeah, it does actually pass that parameter, but we don't.
Do you Kanban those?
We do not. Not at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in the same place.
I feel like
I have backups, but I think I should just Kanban them.
We have enough different holders that it's a little bit... We could just have one of each extra, I suppose.
Or just one of the common ones that you kind of reach for.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is the common ones is like 7 different things.
Okay.
So
yeah.
It's not like... That's not a crazy amount of money to have just sitting there, and it would get used, I'm sure. But it's also... There's also that the temptation there, I think, would be that right now we have a high impetus to break down unused tools to use the holders.
Yep.
Which is, on the one hand, it's extra work, but it's also, that stops that system from just ballooning ad infinitum.
Totally. Yep.
So if we had a simple reach for another holder every time instead of breaking down an unused holder, I'm curious to see what would happen.
That makes, I think something we've been talking about, curious about your thoughts, is adding, I was just reading about Toyota's classifications of Kanban, that like they have different types of Kanban that they've sort of broken out into. And I was kind of thinking it might be useful to have they sort of have this, but a classification, like what if someone could pull a Kanban when they ran out of tool holders and had to go break something down? And it was more like, it wasn't like order another one. It was sort of like order a review of the process in a funny way.
Yeah.
To be like, oh, something like this, just flagging, that something happened here. Because two solutions. One is let's get better at proactively breaking stuff down in an appropriate sort of systemized way. Or the other would be let's order more, right?
Yeah, or if you have multiple of those Kanban for each tool holder, it could be a very simple like way to catalog how often it's being used.
Right. True. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the topic of changing tools, for a long time, I was very married to, for a long time until like a week ago, very married to like, we're not changing tools in the CNC. Instead, we'll just like design around what we have. And I think like to the conversation about downside versus upside, I think I've been maybe a little myopically focused on saving on like processes when and like systemization and efficiency when like doing something efficiently does not make it a good business, right? And like, and if I see, like, we've gotten some requests for buckles and a few people for the same buckle have been like, man, you would sell so many of these. Like, it's just, and and they're hard to make basically with our existing tooling. And instead of being like, we're just going to tool up for whatever we need, and then we will find good systems like you've done, I would say, with your tooling. I mean, you don't have a choice in a funny way, but
sure. Yeah.
But still, I mean, credit where credit's due. Like, we'll do the thing, we'll do it poorly, and then we'll get better at it. Or not poorly, inefficiently.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, so I just kind of threw that out and went like, let's design awesome products, like buckles that we're excited about, that other people are excited about, and then we'll figure out how to make them and how to do that efficiently. And frankly, I keep talking about this, but like, again, it's sort of feeling like we're maxing out our CNC. And so if we buy another CNC, they have more tool slots. Also, we could start to push different product lines onto different machines, though that has problems. And anyway, just kind of wanted to like, I think trying to grow the business is more important, especially when you're early, which I would say we are. And like finding where your business should exist in the world is sort of, there's more potential in that than like whatever, saving 10 cents on some process you do twice a week. Right?
Yeah. Again, it's being really like downside sensitive instead of upside focused.
Yeah.
Right. Like having to change tools is a downside, and you can work really hard to remove that, or you can say, we're going to make an extra, I don't know what it is, thousands of dollars a week by this 5-minute tool change. Now, to be fair, like coming up with a robust system for production work for tool changes is a project, right? It's not just the time of changing the tools, it's the time of developing the system. Having said that, it is, I'm sure, worth the benefits, assuming they sell. Yeah,
totally. On that note, you sent me your post. Thank you for that.
Yes.
And got it running. First, top of the list, the timestamp at the top of the program is so good. I feel like that should be standard. It's always like V1.1, V1.2, V1.3, and then you start again. I don't know. This just solved that because I would post it, and then when I was at the machine, I was like, "Is this the latest?" And I just like check my phone, and it's like, "Yep, that was 2 minutes ago. That's definitely the latest program." Is what I'm looking at.
It's been absolutely key for us, especially because we hand programs off from person to person. They don't necessarily know your naming convention, but you can, bring the work order slip back and they will reload it and they're like, this isn't the right program, or it's like, and usually it's like either the person forgot to actually load it to the database, or they need to refresh their browser. And it's like very
Either way.
simple. Yeah. Either
important.
way, you've caught the mistake. Yeah.
That's awesome. So one thing I was curious about is you have it push the ID, I think, of the tool, is my guess. That unique ID.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is possible in the brother control, but I was sort of thinking there is a last program run saved in the machine, right? Because you can go look at stats from that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this exists, but I was kind of curious if it would be possible to compare the last program's run, tools, and then just have it go to all the tools that needed to be changed that were different,
Potentially, yeah. I actually, the computer cut out for a second, so I lost a smidge of what you said, but I think I got the gist. I'm sure there is a way. What we have discussed, because we already have you mean talking about like having it automatically go to those pockets, or just kind of like flagging which ones need to be changed?
Well, I guess either way. What you do with that information might.
Yeah. We definitely have discussed doing a digital compare of last program and current program, and haven't come up with a great system yet. We haven't really tried hard, though. Our physical compare system, it works pretty well, aside from the fact that someone has to walk over there. But in our small shop, it's pretty straightforward. So I think I've talked about it before, but I could go over it again really quick, which is we have all of our tool tags on basically just like a grid on the front of the machine.
Mm-hmm.
And that grid has all the tool pockets numbered. So each space on the grid is one tool pocket. When you put a tool in the machine, the tool tag goes on that grid position, and they're magnetic, so they just stick to the front of the machine. And the part of the tag you can read is just facing out. And so you can very quickly just scan through that grid and see what's in the machine. And right now, the way we do a setup is we populate our cart with a red puck for every tool that's required for that next job. And then we walk over to the machine and we compare the upcoming list to the the tool tags on the machine. And anything that's already in there, we just flip the puck to green, meaning it's good to go. You don't have to add it to the setup cart or put it into the machine. So that would be a little more straightforward if it was a digital compare, and it wouldn't require walking, and it would be less, it could potentially be less like number soup in someone's brain. The one thing, it would have to compare ID number and also holder and stick out, because those are things that we adjust. So it's not. Yeah.
I mean, your system seems pretty solid. I think for us, the trick is that we are used to not changing. And so it's not like, okay, every time we're going to check, right? For us, it's every time we are not going to check. And so maybe we just have to change that. As Sam said, he's like, there's a lot of stuff we have to get right to not crash the machine. And so this is just one more. So, we can probably just add that to our list. But yeah, it would be nice to just kind of know, because we're not going to be changing out all the tools. That said, I have now been thinking about doing stuff in stainless steel and whatever, which would require changing out every tool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
By the way, do you have a recommendation for if we wanted to do steel jaws for a good steel to use?
For the material?
Yeah.
I don't. I've never made steel jaws, but I think a lot of people say that like chromoly is a nice medium hard, easy working. You can harden it if you want to steel. So that might be a direction to go. It's not that expensive.
I'm thinking maybe I should just buy some Shunk soft jaw blanks to start off with.
Soft jaw blanks?
In steel, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're eye-wateringly expensive unnecessarily, but
I know. They really are.
They really are. But yeah, no, I would try. I mean, honestly, even just like if you're clamping on aluminum and you've been using aluminum for jaws,
Yeah.
just going to even just 1018 or mild steel is going to be a huge step up in terms of longevity. Although, you may want to go with something a little harder so that they don't indent with chips. I don't know.
I think that would be the dream. I think that the issue we run into is, chips kind of adjusting your tooling and the part. I'd rather all the damage accumulate on each part and not on the jaws.
Yeah, for sure. I would start with 4140 and see how it is, and then maybe make 2 sets and get one of them hardened.
Cool. One tiny thing that I was sort of noodling on is we've been struggling with ironically stockouts of our finished goods.
Have you heard of Arda?
No. And it's been kind of brutal. We basically the big thing was switching from in-house process to an outside process that we can't really control the lead time. And it's way longer, and simultaneously had a pretty big bump in demand. But really what was striking to me is the second you have a stockout with Kanban, you start losing information because there's no additional information to capture. And that's true with any system, actually, because if you put something out of stock on your website because it's like, we don't want to take orders, we have already too many orders to fill, and we don't want to piss off customers, you now have pent up demand, and you have no idea how much demand you have because you're taking away the ability of your customer to click like an intent to buy. And so that's sort of what we've been running into. And frankly, like that interaction of the customer clicking that button on our website is the first Kanban loop, right? It's a signal from our customer telling us to produce that part. And so that's the first breakdown in the chain. And so every time we increase our quantities and then put them up on the website thinking like, okay, we should be good and we should just be able to roll smoothly without running out, we have more pent up demand than we anticipated. And so it's kind of interesting. And before, I could just like work late or work a weekend or something and just fully catch up, right? I could just like paint parts and we'd be good to go. Now we have like a 5-day to 5-week lead time seemingly, which is just brutal. But
5 weeks?
Sometimes we send stuff out and it's like, it's 5 weeks till it gets back.
Oh my God. That should not be.
Yeah. It's happened once or twice. We have all the data in Arda. That does not make our customers happier.
We know where we're failing.
Yeah, we know exactly what happened. Anyway, it's just interesting because when you're fully stocked out, you're losing data. Sort of why I was thinking about those like safety Kanbans in a funny way. Of if there was another card at the back, that when that one was triggered, it sort of, I mean, again, you're going to lose information still, but at least that's one more piece of information. Yeah. That like something went wrong. It's not that we triggered our last one and then we have a morning meeting where someone's like, hey, we're out of this part. It actually gets triggered into the system and we can kind of address it and capture that anyway. But it kind of sucks. The one saving grace of all that is having a system instead of having no system just means that all these failures amount to something in that we are improving the system. So once we're out of the woods on that, we should be good. That said, I don't know that we've improved like a second order. I don't know if it's second order, but like we haven't improved how to improve the system so that if we do see another big step change in demand or something like that, I'm not sure that we'll do better at the moment, but maybe we'll,
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's again where I've sort of been thinking about like downside versus upside. I've been really focused on like reduction in, I don't know, just like drinking the Kool-Aid on all fronts of like reduction in inventory. And then I'm like, we can't make money if we have no inventory. And our inventory is not expensive. And so like if we guess wrong about the demand for a certain color and I'm sitting on whatever it is, $100 of stuff that didn't sell as well as I anticipated, and that $100 takes up 8 inches by 4 inches by 2 inches in my shop. Like, it's just very low consequence, and I think I've really just been over-indexed on like the theoretical beauty of Kanban and low inventory production.
Sure.
And frankly, we are running, even that would be low inventory production probably. Like we're not ordering 10,000 of this part and then 10,000 of that part next month and then 10,000 of something else the next. We're doing this mixed approach, which anyway. Yeah.
Interesting.
So going to change my ways.
Yeah, fundamentally, you just didn't have a stopgap for that initial delay, right? And you're still trying to catch up from that?
I think that's right. Yeah. And then because our machining is like, we're pretty
close to capacity.
We're pretty close to capacity. I hesitate to say that only because everyone knows that we only run a CNC like 30% of the available hours. If you're lucky. I mean, it's just, like you're there 8 hours a day, right?
Yeah.
We run it into the night as much as we can. We've started being more diligent about making sure that the timing works out so we can run it at the end of the day and it's not halfway through a cycle. Stuff like that. But so there's gains to be had. But yeah, I mean, the second we really put our focus on keeping the machine running, we do produce a lot more parts, but it's not like we can turn it on and suddenly catch up in 3 days. Like it might take us like 2 weeks to catch up.
Yeah. Interesting. Curious. I had an interesting thing here, so we bought a CMM, which we talked about on the pod, and the like initial kind of friction we were trying to tackle with that was, I mean, just a general focus on quality, traceability, etc. But like specifically being able to measure stuff that is hard to measure manually. And it's definitely delivered on that front. But one really interesting thing is that I think it's actually the anticipation going into it was that it was going to be a bunch of extra work and might slow things down. The reality has been that I think it's overall less work and has sped stuff up. And I think that is largely due to how we've chosen to implement, but it's a wonderful surprise. So we purchased the CMM. We also got like a very nice height gauge at the same time and an optical comparator. And the optical comparator we've actually used a lot. The height gauge we've basically not used because the anticipation there was going to be there's going to be simple features that we don't really want to take the time to, put it on the CMM, do the whole rigmarole. And it's turned out that the CMM process is actually quite low friction. And so we've just basically made that our standard.
Very cool.
And kind of on topic of the not prioritizing less work for an individual or position or department, the way we're doing it now is that part of the programming of the part to be machined, part of that task is also programming it for the CMM.
Okay.
So the CMM program is done before the part ever goes to the shop floor to be made.
Wow.
Or at the time that it goes to the shop floor to be made. So the result has been that when the part comes off, the first article comes off the machine, the fixture, the 3D printed work holding for the CMM is done. The program's ready. And the fixturing is quick change. So literally someone walks over with the part, we put it on the CMM, maybe there's a 10 minute delay if another part happens to be running, but usually that's not the case. It goes on there, it gets inspected, and that is anywhere from a 5 to maybe 20 minute at the very longest, but usually more like 5-minute process. And so we have like nearly instant feedback on quality of parts as they come off the machines, and we can go straight back into edits or just continuing to run if the part is good.
Wow.
And so that's been like it's also taken a lot of load off of in the past, often it was the person doing the setup or the proof out who did the inspection, just because like they were tracking and they had it in their hand. They knew when it was done. They just walk over and do it. Now with this separation between the programming and the shop floor department on quality, it's really changed that. So they are able to focus more on continuing to do setups and proof outs. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of talk about how interestingly it's actually made things a lot faster when the anticipation was that it would slow things down.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it could not be that way, and is not that way in a lot of shops where the quality department is like its own thing that's very much like segmented from everything else.
Yeah, I've heard from some friends who like the CMM was the bottleneck of the kind of production generally. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's because every part needed inspection, but I'm not sure that would change it for you. It sounds like the cycle time is pretty quick.
It might, yeah.
Yeah.
If we were doing all parts 100% inspection, that would be a bottleneck, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also they're not cheap, but if that was a requirement, it would be kind of a no-brainer, I think, to just do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do that as in buy another?
Yeah. Or I went to a shop not too long ago where each machine had a dedicated CMM. It was essentially a cell. And
right.
They did 100% inspection of all parts.
Because that's what their customer required, or that's what their system was?
That's their process, yeah.
Huh. Interesting. Well, I guess
if you're focused on like catching issues at the source,
right,
you'd either do that in the machine, but that has like questionable
validity. It's not like you're using up your CMM, right? So like if it's sitting there idle, it's not better. If they have it at every machine, like, I don't know. Yeah.
There's additional handling,
sure,
cleaning, all that kind of stuff. And then there's the very real challenge of like, what do you do with all that information? Like just logistically, how do you handle storing all that in a way that's streamlined and doesn't just like turn into a nightmare on some computer or hard drive? Right? That is real. But you can also just be like flagging go, no go, and not capturing the information.
Right.
So, there's a lot of interesting possibilities there.
Yeah. Fascinating. It's been interesting as we rebuild Arda into our own systems. And so far we have our printing is done. And we're very close to the scanning portion being done. Anyway, figuring out the architecture to capture some of that like batch information, because we should be able to like flow like your material certs into a Kanban that's triggered, stuff like that. I don't know if it's just like ballooning the scope in a way that's not useful. I know it'd be useful to austere. We're kind of contemplating some like load rated stuff, and supply chain traceability is like a big piece of that, right? Like if you have a recall, it's like, well, how much gets recalled? Yeah. Is it just everything in the last 6 months because you want to be safe? Is it, or not because you want to be safe? Obviously you want to be safe because you don't know where the issue is really limited to. Anyway, last little thing here that I think, so Sam started dropping packaging in we've been calling them drop points because to order bin is cumbersome and we say bin way too much. The drop point is just like where the Kanban goes when it's triggered. Okay. Write in if you have a better idea. It's a little less, I think what I don't like about the name is just, it's not immediately clear what it is, but anyway, just dropping the packaging in sort of as a signal to create more of that. And I don't know, I think
using the packaging as a Kanban?
Like if you come across something that's not Kanban, you want more, you just drop the package in there.
Mm.
And then it's just a signal for someone to like enter that into Arda, print out a card, put it in for receiving.
Yeah.
And obviously that's easier in a small shop where the person dropping it in will likely be the person doing the ordering. So it's like, well,
Sure.
I know how much we need, etc. But either way, it's just like a quick way to capture it. And I don't know. I think like...
Is that a flag to make a new card, or is that
Yeah.
a flag to order? Yeah.
I think both. It's kind of like
Sure.
order more of this and put it into Arda.
Yeah.
But I think, and you know, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think over the past couple months, I've gone a little off the deep end with like how cool the theory of Kanban is and like whatever. And fundamentally, the reason that I started using it was because it was simple to use. And I think that's true with all of like every Arda customer. I think like it is very cool. And I think I think everyone sort of appreciates that like Toyota still uses that system, right? Like if they didn't, I feel like you'd kind of be like, okay, like is this capped somewhere in terms of when I should stop using Kanban? But no shop we've deployed at is using it because of its theoretical benefits. They're using it because it's real benefits. And so anyway, just simple stuff like that, like where the rubber meets the road is on the shop floor, and keeping it easy and simple for people to use, and sort of, I don't know. I think that's like where the magic happens. Even if you're using Sharpie and index cards, like it's super powerful and very simple, but really the simplicity is why you're doing it, not the power.
Yeah.
The power is just like why you're not doing it or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is the simplicity with the power, right? Like if it didn't, the power, it is powerfully, it is functional. It's incredibly functional.
Right. SAP is also powerful.
Sure. Yeah.
But not simple. And so like the differentiator, I think here is the simplicity and not the power in a funny way.
Sure. Yes. Agreed.
Sorry. My internet more specifically. Did you say something?
I just said agreed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, good place to wrap up.
Yeah, that's what I got. Thanks everyone for listening. We're theoretically back on our normal schedule now after Uriel's parental leave. So
Yep.
Hopefully he'll be awake.
So far, so good.
Yeah. I would actually definitely he'll be awake. Or at least his eyes will be open. You can find me at Lycan_MFG on Instagram, LycanPrecision.com on the internet, the pod at IncrementalCI on Instagram, and we have a Patreon. Patrons if you feel so inclined.
Yeah, and you can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com on the internet, and arda.cards on the internet and on Instagram. And we will be back next week.
Adios.